I think people are going, but I don't want to take public transportation. And I think the misunderstanding is that you don't have to, because there are already people in that traffic jam that would. And if you give them that option, then there's less traffic for you.
That city went a full year a couple years ago without a single pedestrian or cyclist getting killed. Nobody. Which this is a city of 600, 700,000 people, about the size of Portland, Oregon, where there were you have close to 100 people dying per year.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Smoking Tire Podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Off the Record, the first episode of 2024. It's important to know that you have someone in your team. If you got pulled over during that holiday season, from anything from a speeding ticket to a DUI to a real big one, whatever it may be, Off the Record is here to help. They provide such a valuable service, standing in your corner, standing between you and the insurance companies, you and the courts, you and the law enforcement. You are entitled to an attorney, and in fact, you should have one, and Off the Record will help you find one. That's how it works, folks. All you have to do is make an account at offtherecord.com/TST or use code TST10 on the Off the Record app. That'll get you 10% off legal services that Off the Record will set you up with, right? You take a photo of your ticket, you take a scan of your ticket, or you enter your case number or whatnot into Off the Record's portal, and they will set you up with an attorney in the jurisdiction in which you were pulled over and ticketed, and they will fight that ticket on your behalf, the goal of which is to get those points off of your record, right? That way, you're not facing insurance premiums, you're not facing ongoing fines and court costs and all kinds of stuff. When you get a ticket, pleading guilty doesn't just make it go away. That stuff will follow you around for, in some cases, years. It can impact your insurance. It can impact sometimes your livelihood. I have used them myself. They have an unbelievable record of success with these cases, and if they don't win, you don't pay. Offtherecord.com/TST or code TST10 on the Off the Record app. That gets you 10% for this and future legal services with Off the Record. They are the best. Support the people who support us, providing an incredibly valuable service to the sports car loving community. All right, folks, on this episode, I'm excited to welcome my friend David Zipper to the show. I met him at a technology conference in Germany, and he is a really, really interesting guy, and I think it's important that we talk because he is an urbanist. Ew, dirty word. But I think that urbanists and car enthusiasts have a lot in common and should talk about our similarities and differences more often. David's a senior fellow at the MIT Mobility Initiative, where he examines the connection between transportation policy, technology, and how society works. He is a very, very, very interesting guy. He's also a journalist. He writes for Slate. He writes for Bloomberg. He writes for a million different outlets, and you can check out all his writing at davidzipper.com or follow him on the social media sites. But we have a lot to talk about on this show. We're recording it from home because Zach was a little bit sick and we're not in the studio, but it's all good, and I'm very excited for this show. I hope you guys really enjoy it. It's David Zipper on the Smoking Tire Podcast.
Now it's the show. Zach Ding Show. Thanks for your time, David. I know scheduling is a pain, but our first new show of the year. I've put on my reading glasses so I can seem intellectual on your level. I don't think I've ever done a podcast actually wearing glasses, but if I'm staring at a computer all day, I need them. But I really, when Alex Roy introduced me to you at Tegernsee a year and a half ago, he was like, "You're either going to love this guy or hate him."
That's what he said about you. That's what he told me about you.
Well, we're both very polarizing individuals, apparently.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it went. I like you. I liked you immediately, and I like your writing. I read your newsletter. I read a lot of what you write for Slate and Bloomberg and The Atlantic and all these other stories. Every time I see your name on a byline, I do read it. And I thought it was finally time to have you on the show because we have this constant thing going on where people confuse car enthusiasm and car addiction and dependency. And I am constantly battling with the world to break that down and find ways that car enthusiasts and urbanists can get along without conflating the two. And that's why you're here. You're an urbanist. You write about transportation. You write about AVs and EVs and public transportation, and you know so much about this topic. So thank you for joining us.
No, my pleasure. And I'm glad to be here, not only because you and Alex might be my two favorite bald-headed middle-aged guys in transportation. It's not that competitive, really. But
you break it down by hairstyle.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very limited.
No, like I swim in various circles. We actually met at a transportation technology conference. You and I did, and I spent a lot of time with VCs and car guys, as I know you do, but I spend more time with the urbanist crowd in the sort of like urban planning world. And there's not a lot of connection between people like you, or I think a lot of your listeners, and the urbanism world. And I just am really happy to see you trying to build bridges, and I'm happy to do whatever I can to help.
Well, I think that we have like more in common than a lot of people think. And it starts, there's some obvious ones, right? Like car enthusiasts and urbanists both hate traffic. No one likes traffic. But like urbanists and car enthusiasts hate traffic more than even like regular people do, I think. I don't want to drive my fun cars in traffic. I don't want to sit in traffic in my life. I don't want to commute in traffic. And I try to do things to minimize my own, not only my own footprint for other people, but my things that minimize my own footprint, like my Vespa and my e-bike. They take one car off the road for other people. It's one less car that other people have to wait for. But also in California, we can lane split. And so I can get through traffic much, much easier and get where I need to go in a pretty light footprint. We both hate touchscreens. We both love buttons. I wrote a whole thing about this past year about buttons coming back. And I appreciate that. And a lot of enthusiasts who watch our car reviews, they hate touchscreens too. They want buttons to come back, and it's because they're not distracting while you're driving. You can drive and hit a button without having to take your eyes off the road. So there's two things right there that we both agree on.
100%. Yeah.
But what other things do you think that outside of that urbanists and car enthusiasts can agree on? Well,
I think car enthusiasts are still people. Who have other parts of their life beyond, driving the cars that they love. And a lot of the time, in my experience, people who are car enthusiasts usually live in big cities. They tend to cluster in big urban areas. And you're in LA. I know lots in San Francisco or in the Bay Area like that. And those are the kinds of places where, it doesn't matter, anybody's quality of life is going to be enhanced if you're able to wake up in the morning and, if you want to, go on a quick walk or a quick bike ride to get a cup of coffee. No one's going to take their Porsche to get a coffee every day and feel like this is necessarily the best use of their time, as far as I can tell. So to me, there's a real advantage in being able to no matter what kind of car you drive, or whether you drive no car at all, just to live in a place that gives you a choice in how you move around and makes places you want to reach be accessible. That's just a better way to live, isn't it? That's the way I think of it.
I think so, but I think where that mindset tends to break down with people, and this may just be the hive mind of the internet, is that they hear you say something like that. And they go, you're trying to take my car away. You're trying to right now, I get in the car and I drive to the coffee shop, right? We'll use the morning coffee as an example, and you're trying to take my car away. Why is that not what you're doing?
I don't think it's a matter of taking anything away from anybody. It's a matter of saying, if you or if somebody else wants to have an alternative way of getting to a coffee shop, we're going to make it possible for you to be able to walk there or to be able to bike there. No one's going to force you to get on a bike and go get a coffee, but wouldn't it be better to have choices? That to me is the essence of freedom, is being able to have alternatives that you choose from. And in this country, in much of this country, you basically have no choice but to drive to get places. And I'm not sure that's really the best way to live.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there are certainly places in the country that are spread out enough where walking or biking to things is not practical. Okay, and that way of life, no one's trying to change that. If you want to live in the middle of nowhere and drive to everything, that's going to be there. But I think the problems are for people who want to live in cities, which many of us do. The real estate that is allocated towards cars and towards parking actually does take away it's really giving a handout to car owners at the expense of people that can't afford cars or choose not to use cars in ways that can be otherwise beneficial to the economy and to people, such as the outdoor dining areas that we saw during COVID.
That's right.
Such as safe biking lanes. I ride my e-bike a lot from my house to my office because it's not very far away and the weather's good here. And, it's actually, not only is it a lighter footprint and, whatever, it's actually faster. It's a few minutes faster than driving a car. Mm-hmm. Because during morning rush hour traffic, there are a couple lights that get really backed up. So it's actually substantially quicker. But it's really dangerous. I have to ride down a road that is 3 lanes each way, undivided, without a clear bike lane being marked or divided with a physical barrier. And it just so happens that I have a very fast e-bike. Shout out to Vintage Electric. And my e-bike can go 40 miles an hour, which in this particular instance is safer because it can actually go kind of the sort of the speed that cars go. But some cars go 50 or 60 down this road. And so without that protected infrastructure, I can understand why somebody, even though it's under 2 miles, might not want to ride a bike on that road. And so I think that infrastructure is allocated in a way that favors cars. And that's mirrored throughout our city, I think.
Yeah, we've done that for 100+ years. You're totally right. It's interesting looking back. If people want to nerd out with the history, there's a really interesting book called Fighting Traffic by a University of Virginia historian named Peter Norton. Have you read that one?
And there's another one called Policing the Open Road, which covers
Sarah Seo.
And there's other one, and also the Henry Graybar book, and there's other books that cover the transition between horses and cars and how the street got divided up the way it sort of is now.
And it was hugely controversial. We don't think about it anymore, but there were huge rallies and marches with hundreds of thousands of people in cities like Baltimore and St. Louis around 1920, where people in cities were saying, hey, look, this street space is for our children playing. It's for us walking wherever we want to walk. It's not for cars to go fast. And that's actually where you get terms like jaywalking come out of. It's where you get the crosswalk actually was created as a way to facilitate car speed. So
and the crosswalk is interesting too, because the crosswalk allowed the onus to be put on the pedestrian rather than the car to not be hit by the car. Yeah. And that was when cars were still pretty slow. Cars weren't going 60. So cars were going 25, and they were like, well, how do we make this the human's fault if they get hit?
No, I mean, you joke and smile as you say that, but this actually was a
tragedy plus time, right?
Well, right. No, it was a concerted effort in the 1920s by the auto industry to say, look, if we want to sell to urban residents, they already had. So people know this probably. The Model T caught on at first with a lot of farmers, for example. Rural America was into the car, and that was no problem. That was great. But in cities, car companies were not stupid, and they realized, like, if we want to sell to cities, we need people to be able to drive this thing fast.
Yeah.
And here, this is like the fundamental tension, or a fundamental tension. I think the U.S. has just managed to avoid acknowledging.
Guys, we got to take one more break today because we are supported by CrowdHealth. Why are you still sending money to those big insurance companies that profit off of not paying your bills? It's true. That's how insurance makes money. You pay them, and then they don't pay you when you need them. That's like, it sucks, but like that's what insurance is. Like, did you know that 48 million claims on Obamacare last year were denied? That's not to mention claims that were denied from other private insurance companies. 1 out of 5 are going to get rejected. Do you want to take that chance? Health insurance sucks. It's confusing, it's expensive, and it's frustrating, and there's a better way. Welcome to the alternative. It's CrowdHealth. CrowdHealth was created to get rid of the headaches of health insurance. For $175 for an individual or $575 for a family of 4 or more, you'll get access to a community of people who are willing to help out in the event of an emergency. Literally crowdsourced healthcare. That's how it is. You'll get telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, and more. All this without doctor networks getting in the way. Let CrowdHealth help with your healthcare needs. You can get started today for just $99 a month for the first 3 months if you use code TIRE to get the healthcare you deserve. Remember, CrowdHealth is not insurance. Learn more at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com and use code TIRE.
Yeah.
And here, this is like the fundamental tension, or a fundamental tension. I think the U.S. has just managed to avoid acknowledging for really the last century, which is there's just no way to have fast car traffic along with vibrant, safe urban life. You
Right.
have one or you have the other. And we have, in most of the U.S., chosen to facilitate fast car traffic in a way that I think just makes it a little bit less fun to live in most of American cities.
So I agree. And I don't think we need to like ban cars from, all cities. I don't think that it's
No one's
all
suggesting that, really.
No.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
but I mean, there's I think I don't want to call them necessarily bad faith interpretations. I think they're misinterpretations of what folks like you say, because there are certainly pockets, areas that we could start with neighborhoods that are already very walkable, right? And already very desirable. I'm talking about places where it's worked, like Times Square in New York City, Washington Square area in New York City, maybe Gramercy Park, stuff like that. In LA, I'm talking about parts of Venice Beach. I'm talking about maybe Hollywood Boulevard. I'm talking about Abbot Kinney, places like that are already heavily foot trafficked and bicycle trafficked, where cars could park on the outskirts of those neighborhoods and then walk in. We don't need to, you're not going to blanket ban cars in LA. It's ridiculous. But just to create pockets of walkability, pockets of commerce.
Yeah, and if you take a step back, I always think I think you're totally right. And to take a step back, I always find it helpful, and people are just like, I don't understand what's the problem with having cars and open parking and fast roads. Like, that's just sort of makes life easier. And I say to them, well, where do you want to take vacations? What cities do you enjoy visiting? And you and I hear the same things. Oh, I love being in New York. Yeah, I like going to Paris. Yeah. I'm like, really? No one goes to Paris because it's easy to park. It's freaking impossible to park there. They go there because it's so pleasant to walk around and be part of like the urban fabric and to hang out. And we can have that in the U.S. And I think, to your point, there are places in the U.S. where we do have that. I actually think a really interesting example, which we don't talk about, I think, enough, is 14th Street in Manhattan, which like 3 months, this is like memory hold because it happened 3 months before COVID, but in October of 2019, do you remember this? Like, it was very controversial.
The bus
in New York
lane.
City,
Yeah, the bus lane.
Like, private cars were restricted just from that road. Only one road, east-west corridor across Manhattan. Hugely controversial. People were predicting apocalypse with congestion and pollution on nearby streets in Greenwich Village and so forth and so on. And what happened? Do you remember this?
It was fine.
People called it the miracle on 14th Street. New Yorkers loved it. It was all these stories about how pleasant it was to have this oasis of quiet and walkability. And I think about that story a lot because to me, it's like it's funny. I feel like a lot of us Americans, we just say, oh, well, yeah, Paris is nice, London is cool, but we could never have that in America. And I'm like, we really could.
Yeah, I mean, they're choices, right?
Yeah.
Somebody or some group of people made a choice, and some people in the beginning were upset with that choice, probably. And, you know, all those great little squares in Italy and France and those old cities, you know, in the middle of the 20th century, those squares were full of cars. There's photos of it. They did have that. And then someone made a choice to say, hey, wouldn't it be better if these squares were full of outdoor dining around this fountain? And now, you know, I'm privileged enough to have traveled to a lot of those cities. That's where I want to go, and it's a very pleasant and it's not just for tourists. The locals are sitting out at those restaurants having coffee and enjoying themselves as well.
And as far as I know, Matt, you'll know better than me, but it's not as though there is a dearth of car guys or people who love their fancy cars in Munich or Rome or Milan, because those cities basically have facilitated walking and biking and have slowed down urban traffic. A lot of people still love their cars. They just want to go drive on the highways outside the city or maybe on a private track. To me, that makes sense. That's sort of a way for everyone to win, the way I think about it.
But what do you say to someone who lives in a city now and has a car, right? And they're thinking about what we're saying in this show, and they go, well, I agree in principle, but I don't want to give up my car.
Yeah.
So what is the response to someone like that? Because they're in a cycle, right? They don't want to give up their car because the way things are set up now, they need their car, right? Yeah. And so it's not they feel, I think, mistakenly that it's on the individual to give up their car as opposed to what?
Yeah, I would say no. Don't give up your car. You really can't give up your car. No one's going to ask you to, and you shouldn't. Don't worry. But maybe it would be. Let's say that you live in Chicago, or the suburbs of Boston, what have you. Say maybe don't worry about yourself right now, but wouldn't it be nice if your city was able to provide public transportation of a higher quality that you could trust it to actually get you where you want to go reliably and comfortably? And that there were safe, protected bike lanes of the kind that apparently you don't have where you live, Matt, in LA.
We have a few, but not enough
right where you are.
Sure.
Yeah, but if you build that infrastructure and you also, frankly, have to build a little bit more densely so that places you want to reach are nearby, then that person who is saying don't take away my car still could keep their car, but they might feel like maybe it's in their own interest to go down from having two cars in their family to having just one, and having the other person, be able to take transit, walk, or bike, and they end up saving some money and being a little bit healthier. Yeah. That's a choice that they would have. But the sad thing is, right now, relatively few Americans even have that kind of a choice because we've locked everybody into driving.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to traffic, right? I think when we say we want better public transportation, as opposed to spending that money building another lane on the freeway, I think people are going, well, but I don't want to take public transportation. And I think the misunderstanding is that you don't have to, because there are already people in that traffic jam that would. And if you give them that option, then there's less traffic for you.
Yeah.
That option helps you, even if your choice is or your need is still to drive.
Yeah, and then Matt, for me, I sort of flip it around too, and I sort of say, all right, let's say that we just get rid of public transportation, get rid of all bike lanes, and everybody drives. How does that work in New York City? How does that work in Boston?
Folks, we got to take a quick break for today's sponsor, Groove Life Belt. The Groove Life Belt, man, they sent us some of these Groove Life belts, and they are awesome. Trying to lose some weight, I'm trying to get in shape. And my old belts, that 1-inch gap, that's like too much. Right? That's like too much. Like if you're losing or gaining a little bit, even if it's just a meal or a good workout or you're cutting or any of that kind of stuff, right? These belts have a really nice like micro buckle, right? The Groove Life belt has this proprietary webbing. It's engineered with just the right amount of stretch, and then Groove Life designed the world's most awesome buckle. It snaps using these rare earth magnets set in an aluminum alloy. Your waist will thank you. Those old school belts are out. The Groove Life belt is in, and that buckle includes what they like to call stiff tech. That's a fancy way of saying there's no annoying belt flaps that need to be tucked in on the other side. Whatever happens to your Groove Life gear, they're here to help with a 94-year no BS warranty. The Groove Life belt will probably outlive you, unless you're doing one of those things where you like cut your head off and freeze it for 3 centuries. And even then, they'll probably take care of you. If you come back from the dead to file a claim on your Groove Life belt, they'll probably just take care of you, just to make you go away, because you'd be kind of scary at that point. Groove Life is awesome, especially, I'm in between these belt sizes day to day, week to week, and I can make those little adjustments, and I love it. They've grown from a side project to a company that now provides for over 100 families, recognized by Inc. magazine as one of the fastest growing companies in the USA. Plus, Groove Life makes more than just belts. They've got wallets, rings, watch bands, AirPods, cases, and much more for your everyday carry. Look, it's 2024. Are you still using that same belt from '04? Now is the time to upgrade your belt game with Groove Life. Head over to groovelife.com/Tire20. That's TIRE and the number 20 for 20% off all Groove Life products. It's the best offer you'll find, but you've got to use my link, groovelife.com/Tire20 for 20% off your order. One last time, that's groovelife.com/Tire20 for 20% off your order at Groove Life. Now, back to the show.
Like, we literally don't have the street space to come close to accommodating that. Do we really just basically have urban life ground to a halt? And you bring up a really good point, which is that every time that we expand highways, this is something that, Texas is famous for doing outside of Houston with the Katy Freeway. There's this principle called induced demand that explains why people end up taking more trips and the highway ends up filling up, and it doesn't actually solve congestion.
Hey, so, Austin, looking at you.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what's the, like if you take a step back and think, at some level, it's like I don't know that we even really have an alternative, but to invest in alternative modes if we want to have viable cities.
But we are going to keep trying. we are going to keep the 405 could be 12 lanes each way.
No, I mean, it's become like a meme. Have you seen like these like jokes online, like AI, like let's expand the highway another 8 lanes. How about another 8? Give me another 10 likes. We'll make it 25 lanes. And it's just like it's funny, but it's painful at the same time.
No, that's the thing, right? I mean, I've now lived in this city for 15 years, and I've seen it get more congested, and I've seen them at the same time. I've watched them add more lanes to shit. It's just it's hilarious and not in a good way. But you've traveled all over the place, and you frequently write about things that you see in other countries that do work. And we talked about, walkable squares in Europe and stuff like that. Where else in the world? Americans, we don't like to learn things. It's unfortunate, but we don't like to learn things that work other places in the world. We like to find reasons that they won't work here. But let's try this anyway. Where can we look in the world to successful policy right now to say, hey, okay, this is working, maybe we should try this?
Gosh, that's such an open-ended, enticing question. Of course, I think of like 50 things at once. But you're right. I like to zero in on specific examples. Last year, especially in Europe, I think I wrote like 10 articles about.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I had this
European
question,
cities.
because you have a bunch of places that were like, I went to this And Zach, if you want to in the background just pull up David's website and his articles, there's a lot. We can just go off of headlines.
All
right, so here you talk a lot about cycling and e-bike infrastructure.
Yeah.
So let's start there.
Yeah, there's a lot of examples. I think I'm just trying to offer some concrete, specific policies that I think are really compelling. One approach that I think is really interesting was adopted in Finland and in Lithuania, actually, as well as in Madrid, which is to do basically it's like a sustainable mobility for clunkers program.
Okay.
Remember Cash for Clunkers from 15 years ago?
Yeah,
you basically turn in your old car and get
that's
some
the reason
money back.
there are no 1990s Explorers left. They're all gone.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
So those countries actually had a spin on it. Say, all right, give us your old gas-powered, crappy mileage car, and in return we'll give you several thousand euros of money that you can spend on a scooter or an e-bike or a transit pass. I think that's an interesting approach toward not just sort of swapping out cars, but actually thinking about giving people a chance to maybe get rid of a second or third car that's particularly terrible for the environment. That was a very popular program, especially in Lithuania when it ran. That was something I find pretty interesting.
This photo I don't know if you chose this photo in your Bloomberg article or if your editor did, but it looks like it's probably from Helsinki, and it's a guy riding a bicycle in a blizzard, straight up bicycle in blizzard. And I think that this photo, not only I was in Finland 2 weeks ago,
really,
and I saw this very thing. And I wasn't even in Helsinki. I was 2 hours by air north of Helsinki.
Wait, where were you? Where were you?
I was in Levi in Lapland, in the north of the Arctic Circle.
Yeah,
cold, and dark, and I saw multiple people, and probably 4 or 5 people commuting from their cabin into the ski resort on bicycles in the dark, in the snow. And my first thought was, that's incredible. And my second thought was, the Finnish are so much tougher than Americans.
No, we're going to turn this into like a Finland podcast. And your third thought should be, this is why, if you're Russia, do not fuck with Finland. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So yeah, I was in Finland a year and a half ago, and had a similarly whoa kind of reaction. You didn't go to? Did you go to Oulu by chance? You ever heard of the city?
I went really far to go there for one day to drive Porsches on the ice, but this is just what I saw.
Yeah, your life is so weird. But anyway, we're going to put that. I'm not even going to go there. I'm going to pretend you didn't say that. But,
I noticed the cyclist.
No,
this is content. I noticed the cyclist.
I think that's beautiful. So, no, in all seriousness, you want to talk about lessons? There's a city called Oulu, which is north of Helsinki. It's actually bigger than where you were. It has, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think a couple 100,000 people. One of the top 5 cities in Finland, and it's so cold there that the temperature basically stays below freezing for months sometimes in winter. And what's amazing, you say of course there's no biking, people would assume in America, because when it gets below 60, Americans are it's too cold, I don't want to bike. No, in Oulu, in the dead of winter, 12% of trips are by bicycle.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. There are these photos of public schools where you have bike parking outside of it full of kids' bikes. They just do it. And how do they do? So the question is, how do they do it? Are they made of tougher stuff? Well, probably, but that's only part of it. They also have really good infrastructure, and they actually pack down the snow so that it becomes like sand to be able to bike on it. It's a lot easier, and they even have. I saw actually on Twitter. I follow the guy who's in charge of bike paths and sustainable mobility in Oulu. He's fascinating to learn from. But in Oulu, there are these. Sort of because the bike lanes are going to be the bike lane dividers will be covered up for months by snow and ice, right? You can't see anything that's actually on the street, so they actually project signage down like fluorescent lights at night.
Oh, that's
night,
cool.
Like 20 hours a day.
Yeah,
So you can
that's
say, oh,
awesome.
this is my lane, this is yours, this is the pedestrian area. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, really cool. I like that a lot. That's very cool.
So that's all. Yeah, Finland is awesome. And frankly, can I give you one other Finnish anecdote? Just because I love talking about Finland.
I'm in a Finnish vibe right now. I ate reindeer 3 meals. It was delightful.
Finland is a very weird, quirky, and wonderful place. That was my reaction from going there. But so I was in Helsinki, and I actually wrote a story. I think you had it up on the screen just a couple minutes ago about road safety in Finland. And Finland is, I think, like 4 times safer per capita.
Well, their driver training is so serious over there. I mean, there's literally like a saying: if you want to win, hire a Finn. That's like in car racing.
Is that
like
right?
The Finns are so good at driving; they take it so seriously. And when I was there, like our cab driver was mobbing a Sprinter van in the snow. Like, dude, the guy was hauling ass on these studded tires on a snowy road. And I was like, I'd hire this guy to race on my team, like right now. Like he's
awesome.
a cab driver.
That's
like,
so
it was
interesting.
great.
Yeah, I love it. So I was talking with urban planners in Helsinki, and I complimented them because that city went a full year a couple years ago without a single pedestrian or cyclist getting killed. Nobody. Which this is a city of 600, 700,000 people, about the size of Portland, Oregon, where there were you have close to 100 people dying per year in total. And so I asked, at the time, it's funny, when I was in Helsinki, at this time, the federal government here in the U.S., the Department of Transportation, had put out this call for proposals on how to use technology to avoid crashes and in particular protect pedestrians at intersections. Probably, Matt, we're at a 40-year high in pedestrian deaths in the U.S.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that in a second, but continue your thought.
This is maybe a lead in, yeah. So I had this in my mind. I said to this Helsinki urban planning guy, I'm really curious, what role has technology like sensors and V2X and all this stuff played in your success saving lives and reducing crashes here? And this Finnish guy, Heikki, hi Heikki if you're listening, nice guy, he looked at me like I had horns coming out of my head. He's like, technology did nothing. All we did was slow down the cars, David.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
We just slowed down the cars.
Well, it's so funny. So rocket science, and it's so interesting. We are in America at a 40-year high of pedestrian deaths, and it seems like we have an addiction to very large and heavy vehicles, and it's not hard to understand why, right? Because as soon as some vehicles get big, then everyone else wants a big vehicle to feel safe if they get into a crash with a big vehicle, or to see over. Of course, that's moot now that everyone has an SUV anyway, the taller driving position, and we've been marketed to as these vehicles being rugged. But then most of them are driven on the street, so then they had to make them fast. And now they're sloping back the roofs because people actually want a sports car that's also an SUV, which is hysterical and stupid. 35% of Porsche Cayennes are the sport roof, the angled, which even the Porsche people will tell you that they are shocked by. Like and almost all of the Mercedes GL classes that are sold now have the slopey rear roof, and half-ton trucks, F-Series and Chevys and even the electrified versions are bigger and heavier than ever. I mean, like a 1990s era F-150 is like somewhere between a Ford Maverick and a Ranger today. It's like it's crazy how high, and these hoods are very high, and so anyway, people are getting killed, and there's other reasons too. Distracted driving is one. And so, okay, so we've got these, and you wrote a piece recently, a couple weeks ago, I think, about huge vehicles, and I'm anti-huge vehicles, and I'm not trying to say if you tow a giant trailer for a living that you shouldn't have a vehicle that can tow. I'm not trying to say that, but a lot of people are buying these to use fundamentally as regular cars. Mm-hmm. Now
Okay.
we have technologies, sensor suites, ADAS, the promise of a self-driving car on the and the premise of which is that it will make us safer. But as you just learned in Finland, the technology didn't save the lives. It was just infrastructure design using technology that already existed. Can we turn the ship the right way at this point? Or is, our addiction to these trucks / capitalism / marketing just gonna run us all over literally?
That's a big question, Matt. Yes, I appreciate you getting into this. I gave myself some voluntary brain damage at the end of 2023, spending a lot of time.
Are you sure you weren't hit by a 1500?
I think so. If I was, I don't remember it, which may not be that much of an answer, to tell you the truth.
The lawyers are certainly hoping that's what happened.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. No, but I wrote the article you're referring to is in mid-December, like a 4,000 word sort of like expose deep dive in Slate about what I call car blow. It's really, and it's two things happening concurrently. One is that the station wagon is basically extinct. Sedans
Such a bummer. That's another place that car enthusiasts can agree with you, that wagons are cool and we should have wagons rather than SUVs.
Yeah, that's a whole other story I kind of want to write, is just sort of like what happened to the station wagon. I think you and I know that it was what really happened. It's not as profitable as SUVs, and the way that we've set up fuel economy rules called CAFE in the U.S. disincentivizes the production of station wagons. But it is really sad, especially for folks like you and me who are old enough to remember, being carted around to soccer practice or whatever in a station wagon. It works just as well as an SUV for a family. But no, it's a pretty stunning statistic. It's in the mid 20% in the 1970s. That's how much of new car sales were SUVs and trucks. And today it's over 80% are SUVs and trucks. And meanwhile, just like you were saying, those individual SUV and truck models are just getting bigger and bigger every refresh. It just happens over and over again, to the point that you're seeing, this is better than I do. The Ford F-150 today, you put that next to an F-150 from 1983, and it's just a night and day difference.
You can frankly do the same thing with almost any car that has been in production. The F-150 is it's one of the best selling vehicles in America, and B, the one they make today is so ridiculously huge that it's a great example. But there's plenty of images of Porsche 911s today versus the early 80s ones, and it's a completely different and much bigger vehicle. But it's what's funny is we drove a Raptor recently to review it, and I said something to the effect of this car's probably too big. It's so big that wherever you go with it, forget the pedestrian crash thing for a second, which is not a thing you should be forgetting, but it's so big that you are actually inconveniencing others. You're taking more than your share of space on the road. If you park it in a normal parking space, the cars next to you have trouble opening their doors, even if they're parked normally in their space, right? And also, Zach and I drove it for about 400 miles, averaged about 9 miles per gallon. That's probably not great. Yeah, it's not great. It's not great. And so, I was called a hypocrite because I own a 1988 Lamborghini that I drive 1,500 miles a year that also gets poor fuel economy. And I suggested that maybe a car built 35 years ago and a car built in 2023 should not be held to exactly the same standards. But bad fuel economy is one thing, but the parking spaces, the road widths, the lane widths, they're the same as they've been for many years. And the vehicles get bigger and bigger and bigger and use every inch of that space, which doesn't allow for as much cushion for others to potentially use that overlap in space, say, to open their doors in a parking lot.
All of that is true. I mean, this was the central premise of the article that I wrote for Slate, is to say, like, we can look at the history of how this came to be. In a nutshell, it's like ever since the 70s with AMC repositioning the Jeep as the first modern SUV, automakers realized there's a way to make a lot of money by selling these higher margin, more expensive SUVs and trucks to people who frankly don't need the space.
And there's even a quote in your piece about that had to be marketed a certain way to be classified as a certain type of vehicle.
Yeah, well, that I think what you're referring to is the lobbying that the now defunct or now gone AMC, American Motor Corporation, right? That they were the ones that had the Jeep, and they pushed the federal government hard to classify the Jeep as a passenger vehicle, not as a light truck.
Right.
Sorry, excuse me.
The other way around.
Sorry,
the other way around.
Yes, as a light truck, not a passenger vehicle, because the light truck has more lenient fuel economy rules, and that actually meant that all SUVs were going to be able to run through that loophole and be able to have crappy fuel economy. I think the crux of the issue with what I call car bloat is that you have all these sort of unrecognized externalities, is what an economist would call it. It's what you were describing in sort of an intuitive way, Matt. You get it automatically, even if you've never taken economics course, that if you're buying or if you're driving a Hummer, you are putting everybody else in more danger than if you were in a sedan. You are polluting more than if you were in a sedan, including if you have a Hummer EV, by the way. You are tearing up more of the highway faster than if you were in a sedan. You're also eroding your tires faster, and which creates all kinds of environmental issues that we're just starting to learn about, killing off salmon in the Pacific Northwest, so forth and so on. All of those externalities are things that people are not thinking about when they're deciding which car to buy next, because the U.S. doesn't force them to. We don't enforce regulations that restrict what car makers can do. And we also, which you could say is we should or shouldn't do, but we also don't do what I think is so freaking obvious what we should be doing, which is to recognize that this is sort of a classic example of what economists call market failure. The market is not recognizing societal costs here. So the solution here is to do what France has already done and what some local governments like the District of Columbia, where I live, have started to do, and adopt weight-based car fees that basically say, look, still, you want to buy a giant-sized truck, go knock yourself out, but we're going to make sure that you pay a little bit more to compensate for those societal costs that you're imposing on everybody else when you make that decision.
Yeah, we don't have to go the full lefty socialist way to do this. There's actually a capitalist-friendly way to do it. It's just that I think that the people who are getting angry at me for suggesting that these giant vehicles are bad, they don't like the capitalistic way either.
That's just it. I'm always like, you love markets, right? When I get the trolls online, like, don't you love markets? This is a classic market failure. We've known this in economics for 100 years. This is why you need taxation.
Yeah, and it kind of drives me nuts because, well, I also don't think we should necessarily depend on individuals to it would be nice. Let's just say it would be nice if an individual always made a choice that was better for everybody. But it's not realistic, right? It's just not. If I'm going to buy a vehicle that's safer for me in a crash versus safer for the thing that I hit, it doesn't make me a super bad person for not considering the person that I hit, right? That's just how humans work. But that's why we need an oversight, elected people to really show oversight to protect everybody else outside of that car, right?
Well, I think that's really well put. And at the risk of triggering you, because I know you a little bit, I'll give you a recent example with the Cybertruck, when Elon Musk launching it.
I'm triggered.
I know you are. But I warned you, a trigger warning. But remember, Musk said if you are in a Cybertruck in a crash with somebody else, you will win.
Yeah, that's like if you think about that sentence for 2 seconds, it's like so sociopathic and
well, and then you just scale it out. So this is how our entire country is going to operate, where everyone trying to buy the car that makes them defeat the other one on the road. Yeah. How do you run a society that way? This is not how a car market should operate. But we've set ourselves up this way exactly as you're describing by basically I wrote an article in Slate a few months ago that had a good headline that I didn't choose, said about carb load, basically saying the car safety feature that kills the other guy. Somehow conflated vehicle size.
That's a good headline.
With safety.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorites. And this is what decades of refusal or inability to confront ongoing carb load have led to. We've led to just these giant-sized vehicles.
And the funny thing about the Cybertruck, well, I will say, asterisk, full disclosure, we haven't fully seen how that plays out yet. We've only seen what Elon Musk has said his stated intentions are for that vehicle, which itself is pretty sociopathic, right? This is now an apocalypse vehicle in which if you hit things, you win, they lose. Okay, but we haven't seen if that's the reality yet, and so fair and balanced. Let's just table that one for a moment to see if it plays out that way. Okay, I'll give them the littlest bit of credit that maybe that won't actually happen in real life, although my opinion is that it will.
Well, I mean, Matt,
steel.
It's very quick work by your assistant here to bring up the article I wrote about Cybertruck in Slate last month. I would just throw this out there. You know more about car design than I do. We've both seen the videos that Tesla has promoted of people firing guns at the Cybertruck. So, and it doesn't seem to penetrate the body. Okay. Can you realistically design material that's going to be strong enough to repel a bullet, but still somehow able to absorb the blow of a human head?
I completely agree, dude. You're right, and I think that's bad. I think that the implication of it being a sort of apocalypse vehicle where people might be shooting at you and you want to survive that, and if someone's standing in front of you, maybe it's another vehicle, a smaller, less tough vehicle, or maybe some kind of protester that you can just go right through them and be fine and get out of there. The implication of marketing a vehicle that way is very, very bad. And it is a completely different Tesla than the one that designed the Model S. Because the Model S is designed in a lot of ways, and also the Model 3 and the Model Y, to be good to those around it as well, excluding full self-driving. But just in a purely crash standards, the Model S, the Model 3, the Model Y, the old Tesla, pre-total lunatic Tesla, those cars were designed in a much more pedestrian-friendly way. Whereas this vehicle is clearly not, and Elon is just saying it out loud.
Yeah, it reflects the growing paranoia of the company's CEO, I would say.
Yeah, and the total and the outlook of people like him, these sort of long-termism, we can't do anything about climate change at this point, or the growing divide in our country, so we better be the ones who survive it, not you.
Yeah, that's exactly. It's a reflection of the divisive. Yeah, it really is.
It's crazy shit. It's really crazy shit. But that's why we need a functional board of directors at Tesla to say, hey, this guy can't fucking keep talking like this and marketing vehicles like this. But we also need a functional government that can keep up with the pace of these products, which they've clearly shown they can't do.
And it's really interesting. So this was actually the sort of message of the article that's on the screen right now. We're about to find out how dangerous the Cybertruck really is. that I wrote last month. And this is something I don't think Americans really realize, is that people are saying when Cybertruck came out, like, how is this safe? It doesn't pass, like, Musk confused things by saying, oh, it passed all safety regulations and safety checks. Total bullshit.
Yeah, there are
literally no tests that the federal government does before a car is sold to the public.
Yeah. The whole system runs on politeness. It's such bullshit.
Well, it runs on. It's more to be. I won't actually, if you don't mind, I want to actually explain this really quick because I think it's kind of mind blowing. It's called self-certification, and that is just like it sounds. If you are a car maker like Tesla or Ford or whatever, you literally can sell whatever the hell you want as long as it adheres to the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, which says nothing about pedestrians, nothing about ADAS, nothing about anything software related.
Yeah.
So you can do whatever the hell you want. You basically just put a sticker on that car, said, hey, look, we could adhere to FMVSS, and then you certify it, and then you can sell it. There is
it's not even politeness. It's the no, we swear. It's the no, we're good.
We promise.
It's the we promise rule.
This is not how we handle aviation in this country in the FAA. It's not how Europe handles car regulations.
Which is why Cybertruck can't be sold in Europe.
That's right. That's right.
And when I said back in 2019, when I saw the original Cybertruck prototype, I was wrong because I said, I saw it and I went, no way. They can't make that. That's not real.
You said that to me, I remember. Yeah.
That will never, I said it to you too. I said, that will never pass.
Yeah. Not a car is what you said, not a car.
Yeah. And I was wrong, but the way in which I was wrong was wrong. And I was wrong because I thought there were fucking standards. That's why I was wrong. My common sense said there must be standards and that shit won't fly. But I didn't realize that there are no standards and you could do anything you fucking want, no matter how dangerous it is. Isn't that crazy?
Unless and until NHTSA is able to do a study to find a pattern of crashes, including probably people dying, they have no power to do anything about the Cybertruck. None.
Yeah, it's crazy. But Europe, they do.
In Europe,
and they
you have to have the advanced approval. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So
and FAA as well. And I actually am going to have someone named Phil Koopman, who I don't know if you know,
very well,
on the podcast later in January, who's one of the world's foremost experts in ADAS, fly-by-wire, and drive-by-wire, to talk about whether we think the Cybertruck's steer-by-wire system is actually safe, because that car, truck, whatever you want to call it, has no physical connection at all between the steering wheel and the turning wheels. It's all by wire, which I have some real concerns about. And I just finished a great book called Fly by Wire, which I really recommend. Alex recommended it to me, about the development of fly-by-wire systems in aircraft. And I think that's a new area that I'm really trying to get into because someone who's got a crazy fucking name, and I don't have it in front of me, and I can't remember. Yes, it is.
Oh, he's great. We should bring that picture up, because he's a genius of it. He's the best writer about aviation, period.
The book was awesome. It was really great. Yeah, I really recommend that book, Fly by Wire, and the lessons from it are very interesting and not what I expected to learn about fly by wire. And you don't need to be an aviation nerd or any nerd to really appreciate this book. I really recommend it.
Everything he's written is good. He taught himself, I think he learned how to fly and then just ended up writing a bunch of books about it. Yeah. He's wonderful. Anyway, enough of William Langerwish, but I'm a big fan.
No, I mean, let's tangent, to autonomous vehicles real quick. I think there's a book. Have you read the Anand Girardi's book, Winners Take All?
I have.
I think it's an amazing book, and I think it's really important for everybody to read it. It's called Winners Take All. Oh Jesus, what's the subheading of it? It's fuck me. Basically, Zach will pull it up. It's basically the point is there are entire industries built on profitably finding solutions to problems that they themselves have created. rather than just not doing the bad thing anymore.
There's a company called McKinsey. Have you ever heard of them? I can't remember. They do something. Yeah.
Yeah, The Elite Charade of Changing the World. That's the name of the book. Also super recommended. So AVs, right? Autonomous vehicles are going to eliminate road deaths. The technology, which we will sell at a massive profit, of course, is going to save us all. It's going to solve traffic. It's going to solve safety. What say you, David Zipper?
Was that sarcasm?
No, I was dead serious. I'm ready to hand over the stick. Elon, take the wheel.
Oh boy. Yeah, this one. Now you're trying to trigger me after I triggered you with Cybertruck and Elon. But no, because I was before your attempt on your podcast, I was triggered by Cruise over the summer put out.
Sure.
Remember this like New York Times full page ad, a bunch of the newspapers too, saying like America's in a road safety crisis, and that's why we are making a fatal mistake if we don't roll out the red carpet and ease the speed of adoption for autonomous vehicles.
Right.
And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? And 24 hours for an article in Slate basically saying, fuck you, for a couple of reasons. One was, wow, you're really bringing it out of me. I don't usually curse on podcasts, but
It's
somehow
okay. You're allowed. This is the smoking tire. You can drop F-bombs all day.
With you, Matt, it feels right. That's all I can say.
I thought maybe the glasses might stop you from cursing, but no. It's still
No, it
there.
doesn't. No, but in all seriousness, like, okay, let's talk about it. And you have Phil Koopman coming on soon, which is great, and he can give you a lot more info about this. But really quickly with autonomous vehicles, yes, autonomous vehicles will not drive drunk or fatigued and make some mistakes that you or I or others might make behind the wheel, but they'll also make technology mistakes or computer mistakes, software mistakes that you and I would never make.
Yeah.
Like, we don't know ultimately if it's safer or not. And you should talk to Phil more about this. So
I've never been drunk enough to be totally paralyzed by a traffic cone.
Well, maybe you just haven't drunk enough.
I'm not a perfect human by any means, but I have never, ever been so wasted that I saw a traffic cone and just completely froze.
Oh my God. If viewers don't know what Matt's talking about, just Google San Francisco, the coning, and you'll get it. I'm not going to go there, but that was good. That was good, Matt. But even, so the first point is we don't know really whether self-driving cars are going to be safer than humans. We just don't know. But what we do know is that there are, even if in the most optimistic scenario of self-driving cars actually becoming safer, it's going to be decades before they're going to replace all the cars on the road. It's going to cost a ton of money because you know this as much as I do, all of the technology that goes into a Waymo right now is going to cost a lot with all the computers and all the software, et cetera, like those prices would have to fall considerably to be able to have widespread
Elon
adoption.
said camera only is all we need. And he's Elon. Why should we doubt him?
Yeah, and he's also said he's a moderate, so fuck him.
He's also said he's a free speech absolutist.
Yeah, there you go. But what we do know, back to safety with AVs, we know for a fact that we have a bouquet of options available if we're serious about enhancing road safety, that we could adopt right now. We could build protected bike lanes so you can ride your e-bike safely in LA. We can slow down urban arterials where the bulk of crashes that are fatal tend to happen. We could adopt more automatic speed cameras that are far more effective than relying on sort of education campaigns, please drive carefully, or hoping that the cops are able to pull over people who violate. I could go on for a long time with all of the steps we could take that are proven to reduce crashes and cost a fraction as much and are infinitely easier to implement than holding off for self-driving cars. So the idea of saying, look, the only way we can really fix our road safety crisis is to throw open the barn door for AVs, I think is self-serving.
McKinsey said that if we had autonomous cars, we could make so much money saving lives.
So I try to avoid being cynical. I really do. Like I try to assume the best out of people and look for solutions, but I really do question whether this utopianism about autonomous vehicles from the auto industry, among others, is really just sort of a masked effort to fight off efforts to do much easier, much more reasonable steps to save lives that would actually make cars a little bit less valuable. Going back to what we talked about a few minutes ago about like in the 1920s when we made these potentially really bad decisions to facilitate urban car speed. If today we lowered urban speed limits, if we built bike lanes, that makes cars on the margin slightly less valuable. But if we just, say, oh, look, it's going to be AVs to solve everything, that's great news for Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is so much we could do with concrete and paint. I mean, literally concrete and paint. We could move things. We can build. We could build. I mean, literally, we could build speed bumps. We could build bollards. We can build. We can install K-rails. We can do things with concrete and painted lines that today that just require a little bit of money and the willpower, and nothing needs to be invented. No, and I will concede that if every single car on the road were autonomous and connected, you would probably have a pretty safe and efficient road system. But to get from today to that is going to be bloody and messy. And you're going to have computers causing people to die, because they don't know how to deal with humans and the real world in the interim. And I don't believe that you make things safer by first making them more dangerous,
Yeah, I fundamentally believe, as I think you do, that road safety is a political problem and not a technology problem.
It's very funny when people try to. I accept criticism where I fuck up and shit, but a lot of people are like, fucking Farrah's always bringing politics to this, stick to cars. It's like, dude, cars are extremely political. How and where and what we drive is driven by political policy. Yeah, every step of it.
It's completely right. And people sometimes get mad at me. They're like, why do you write about cars if you don't even like them? And I'm like, whether I like them or dislike them isn't really the point. Cars are, first of all, you're right, the whole market is affected by politics, but cars impact or affect every aspect of our lives.
Yeah.
From how lonely we are to how healthy we are to how if we're going to be able to tackle climate change. Like, we can't leave automotive journalism or automotive reviews to the people, which are a minority of people, I think, who just really get excited about this car design versus that car design. I think that's great if that's what you get excited about, but to be honest, these decisions impact all of us.
Yeah, I mean, I think I get excited about cars, and I like driving, and I like engaging with machinery, but at the same time, I recognize that none of those things happen in a vacuum, and what I drive and how I drive does affect others, and what others drive and how they drive affects me.
Yeah.
I want to. I think we agree on a lot, but there's one thing I don't think we agree on, and I want to talk about it real quick. You wrote a piece this past year arguing that there's no reason a car should ever be able to go 100 miles an hour, arguing for speed limiters, electronic speed limiters.
Yeah.
Which I disagree with, because I do think there are places where that is safe in the right car. Certainly not in the middle of a city. Certainly not down La Cienega in a place in a crowded freeway. Certainly not. But there are places in America and the world where that is actually reasonably safe. I disagree with you. So I think that we could change our roadways and our infrastructure the ways we just talked about that would mitigate how fast a car could drive without having to restrict the car. What do you say?
I say a couple things. I'll say a couple things. So first of all, there are two different ways of approaching this question. There's two different types of solutions. You have speed governors, which frankly just simply say the car can't go over speed X, right? And then you have more modern technology called intelligent speed assist. I don't know if you know about this. Have you know about it?
I do, yes, but please explain it.
Yeah, just really briefly. And this is now being mandated for new cars in Europe, although not in the US. But intelligent speed assist basically uses GPS to be able to identify the speed limit on a given roadway or street, and then adjust the sort of ceiling speed based on what that prevailing speed limit is, so that you could set it to go 5 or 10 miles over a speed limit, potentially that adjusts based on when you're in a street or when you're in a highway, so forth and so on. And by the way, it could be just like a flat out cap, like you can't go faster than that, or more likely, it's going to be softer than that. It could be haptic feedback, it could be auditory feedback if you're trying to go faster than that upper bound, or it could be just more pressure on the accelerator. Have you done this before? Have you been in cars?
I've used it before. Yeah, the idea that it just makes going over a certain speed more annoying and unpleasant. In fact, I own two cars that are imported from Japan, classic cars, in which they have a chime that dings at you when you exceed 100 kilometers an hour, which is the speed limit in Japan.
Interesting.
So when you go over 62, which is 100 kilometers an hour, ding, ding, ding. I mean, it's fucking annoying.
Well, it's meant to be annoying. Yeah. But to your point about intelligent speed assist, the highest speed limit in the U.S. is 85 miles per hour for a given roadway strip or a given highway in Texas. Most of the U.S. is a lot lower than that. And as I understand it from talking with people in the industry, the way that we actually do have speed governors installed in car engines, right? It's
sure, yeah. Most new cars, at least a lot of high performance ones, are installed with speed governors, mainly because of tire speed ratings.
So for high performance cars, that could be a little different. But for cars that you buy, just like a decent new car, a lot of them, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the top speed is on the odometer you see, or speedometer, is 155. And you actually can get pretty freaking high on a lot of these cars.
Yeah. I mean, typically a new car's top speed is governed by, it's electronically governed, but the choice they make for what speed it is governed to is dictated by the speed rating of the original equipment tires.
Oh, by the tires. Okay.
The tires. So yeah, for instance, this is a good example, is the Ford Raptor. Yeah. Right, because I owned one back in the day. I was a different human then, but I owned one back in the day, and it was governed to 99 miles an hour because it came with off-road tires that were rated to 100 miles an hour.
Oh, interesting.
Now, there were ways to remove that speed governor in the aftermarket, and if you did, the thing would go 135 miles an hour, which is way too fast for one of those.
Well, I would argue it's too fast for anything. I guess the question I pose is why anyone should ever be going 110 or 120 miles per hour on a public road. You want to do that on a speedway, on a private track, by all means go ahead. And I know that you and probably a lot of your listeners would want to do that. But it's a different story if you are going 30, 40 miles over the speed limit, as a very small percentage of people do, but those are incredibly dangerous actions on a freeway or an interstate or an arterial in the U.S., because that puts everyone else at severe danger. It really does.
Sure, and I don't disagree. Time and place. And when I say there's places where you can go over 100, I'm talking about the middle of the desert in Nevada or Arizona, places that are truly wide open type spaces. And of course, I'm talking about, high performance cars with someone who knows what they're doing driving. I understand that's not the norm.
Well, what I would say is, like, if I'm driving my family across the country and I happen to be on an interstate in rural Nevada, getting through, is it appropriate for me to have to worry about somebody going 125 miles per hour in their sports car to see how fast it can go on that public road? But I'm just trying to get from A to B. That's the thing, is the danger that is forced onto everybody else on the road when you drastically exceed the speed limit. I don't know why. I understand that when you're passing a big rig on the highway, you want to go a few miles over the speed limit. It might be a little bit safer to do that too. That's fine. But when we're talking about 30, 40 plus miles per hour over the limit, I question why anyone should be able to do that ever. Because we do know what the costs are in terms of safety. That's a real, but reckless speeding, that article you're referencing, it was on the screen a minute ago, in Fast Company, was triggered by a report from the National Transportation Safety Board about a crash in North Las Vegas, where somebody was I think going 108 in a 35 mile per hour arterial, struck a van with a family and killed 7 people in the van.
Yeah, I think they were also
should
drunk.
Never be allowed.
Yeah.
The guy who drove was on drugs.
Yeah, it was a Corvette. Yeah, I remember that.
No, it's not. It's a Challenger.
Oh. I'm thinking of the other one, the guy who was the athlete who was drunk and was driving a Corvette, like, I think it was 130 or 140 in the same kind of
so you could say, well, he shouldn't have been drunk, he shouldn't have been high, but maybe the car shouldn't have let them put everybody else's life at risk because that individual made some really terrible decisions about what they ingested before getting behind the wheel.
Yeah, I understand your argument. I don't have a good I don't have a good counter argument to it. I mean, my main counter argument is that I find myself in extremely specific situations that are not on freeways. They're way out in the middle of nowhere, where maybe it doesn't make sense, but I certainly enjoy crossing the desert at speed and have and can do it safely. But you know what? When I say it, it sounds dumb because I don't have a good reason other than my own personal, enjoyment or whatever.
This is. Yeah. I always like talking with you and interacting with you on social media and whatnot because we do agree on a lot. Like, you're a car enthusiast. I'm really not, although I have a car and I drive. But this is one of the areas where there really is a friction point, I think, between some people who really love being able to drive fast and think they can do so safely, and those like me who, frankly, just want to be able to get where we want to go safely. And I would argue that if you want to be able to drive at 130 miles per hour, 150 miles per hour, and feel like you can do it safely, by all means, go ahead. But you shouldn't be able to put other people's lives at risk without their approval or their agreement by doing so on a public road. Please find a track and do it there.
Well, just speaking on behalf of many car enthusiasts, I agree with what you're saying. Where and when I choose to drive in a sporting manner is typically as far away from people as possible. I go way out in the mountains very early in the morning, and I don't push the limits of cars on public roads. I go to tracks a lot, but for many people, unfortunately, tracks are a very, very expensive way to spend your time. They've gotten much more expensive. Neighborhoods and local governments and stuff are quite hostile towards racetracks and have not made them accessible. They're not considered typically a societal good in a lot of ways. From my own personal perspective of someone who makes videos, the audience doesn't like track videos. I'm actually financially incentivized to not go to racetracks. They cost me more money to take a car to a track, and they bring in less revenue by a lot, substantially less revenue. So I have sort of a perverse incentive to not go to the track, which is weird. And actually not my personal preference, because if you asked me if I had a new Porsche and I could choose a track or a road, I would choose the track every time. It's a strange, perverse incentive I have to not take it to the track. And I'm a very specific person as a content creator, and most people are just trying to enjoy their car. That's also why I encourage people to buy slower and lighter cars and not 800 horsepower cars. There's actually a point beyond which more horsepower stops being fun pretty quickly, and it just makes the numbers go up any higher. So, I mean, look, I don't have a good argument, honestly, against what you're saying. I really don't. You know, you guy driving down the road with your family is entitled to get there safely. And there are certainly people that drive very fast on public roads who don't have the skill to do so in a safe manner, and who do put other people at risk. And I'm not trying to say that I'm holier than thou. I have made calculated decisions that I think minimize the risk to other people, but don't take it away entirely. Certainly don't take it away entirely. It's not a totally virtuous enterprise. But I do think that in the areas where reckless speeding could potentially cause the most harm in urban area, the guy in the Challenger doing 108 and a 35, we could have road design that would have prevented him from getting to that speed, or at least made it much less desirable. And I'd like to see those implemented first,
Well, the challenge, Matt, is that, I mean, while I would love to be able to flip a switch and redo all of the shitty road designs of the past 80 years, especially in the West and in the South, where we have these really dangerous arterials that invite fast car speeds or make it possible, we're talking about billions upon billions upon billions of dollars in retrofits that even if we had the political support to do, it would take decades. Yeah. So actually, I would challenge you to say that road design is the easier way to reduce truly reckless speeding, as opposed to thinking about intelligent speed assist. I actually think intelligent speed assist might be the easier route. In fact, I'm pretty sure, I would strongly believe that it is. Not the only one. We should do all the road design stuff that we're talking about, and we should focus first on the high injury networks and the dangerous intersections. But realistically, redoing our infrastructure is a gargantuan, generations spanning challenge.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that also that maybe, if we had like in Germany, variable digital speed limits with connected cars, based on weather conditions, construction conditions, and so on. That could be sort of a half measure,
maybe
that does get you there, at least on highways.
I mean, potentially. I mean, it's interesting in Germany now. There's a big debate about the autobahns, which famously have no speed limit. There's some people trying to change that. I am not surprised that this was the article I wrote last year that you had the biggest problem with. And I appreciate your honesty in admitting you don't have a great argument for why you have that problem. It just viscerally bothers you because you like driving fast and are a relative. I'm sure you are a relatively safe driver at those speeds. But I think that politically, and I try to think pragmatically, how do we actually bring about change? Nothing's going to get done if people like me who want to see technologies like this advanced basically tell people who want to drive fast, you're a terrible person, just fucking no, stop it. That's not what I say. It's not what we should say. But I hope that there can be some honest conversations along these lines about saying, like, well, what is a way that we can still allow you to enjoy driving fast when you want to, but do so in a way that doesn't put others lives at risk. Maybe there are ways
Yeah, I
of
mean,
setting time
my compromise
other
that I
roads.
would,
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, my compromise where I would be okay with it, if it's GPS based, then I would say if this technology is, implemented in the urban center, in the city where the most people are and on major freeways, okay. And then if you're outside of that, maybe not. And again, I don't have a good argument as to why scientifically that would be the case. But if I was trying to make one, I would find maps where those types of incidents were the most prevalent and implement the technology based on GPS in those areas and say that, well, we can do the most good by implementing it in these red zones.
Yeah.
And then on these remote roads out in the middle of nowhere where very few of these incidents take place, maybe we don't have it.
Well, if nothing else, I appreciate that you are not arguing against speed limiters or intelligent speed assist with my favorite sort of line of debate from all the various trolls that were inspired by that Fast Company article I wrote, where they basically would say, yeah, but what if you're bringing your pregnant wife who is delivering 3 months early to the hospital that's 40 miles away and you got to get there as soon as possible because she's losing blood? I'm like, yeah, how often does this happen to you?
Yeah.
Or are you really just basically trying to find some theoretical construct to let you be able to drive as fast as you want because that's what you prefer? That's the much more common response that I see, which I don't have a lot of patience for.
I think you're probably right. They're trying to find a justification. Just like a lot of the AV people, particularly people who own Teslas, are trying to lean on the fact that these systems make it safer as opposed to the fact that they just want their toy.
Yeah.
My friend Spike has a Tesla and loves autopilot and recognizes how dangerous it is and freely admits that it is super dangerous, but he also wants his toy. And I commend him for being at least honest about it. So few people try and go, oh, this system makes everything safer. And it's like, it clearly doesn't.
Do you get the Tesla people trying to argue to you that the touch screens are safer?
I get a bunch of crazy shit. I get a bunch of crazy shit.
I'm sure. Yeah, it's really safer to be able to have to take your eye off the road and point and touch. Right.
No, I'm not gonna sit here and make some kind of bullshit argument. I don't want speed limiters to exist in places that I personally believe that I personally can drive the right car at a quick pace safely. And I don't have another reason for that. Is it selfish because I'm a car enthusiast and I have a career doing this and I love it? Yeah. Yes, it is. It is. But do I have a rational argument for what you're saying? Absolutely fucking not. I don't.
Well, and I guess the last point I would make, just for listeners who are perhaps identifying with you, because I know a lot will, because they also like to drive fast, I would just say, all right, I guess I would ask, like, what would you say to, the mom who wants to use that highway to bring her kids to visit relatives, and she feels at risk with a car going that fast on that same roadway? What would you respond to her? It's a really tough question, I think.
Yeah. I hope that mom is trained as well at driving as I am. That's what I would say. I'd like that mom to be a Finnish mom. Really, really well trained in vehicle dynamics, able to assess the road conditions ahead.
Only
and
we
adjust.
could all be Finnish, Matt.
We could all be fucking Finnish.
We could all be Finnish.
I want Finnish driving tests. That's what I want for everybody.
Dare to dream. Dare to dream.
Before we let you go, I got a couple of questions from our folks at the Patreon. Of course, if Zach, will you just in the background check the Patreon again to see if there's any last minute ones that came in? Only a few. Of course, if you want to ask questions of our guests, patreon.com/The Smoking Tire Podcast. You can get a ad-free listening experience, watch our live streams, ask questions of our guests, and of course, get an extra private Patreon podcast every month. Okay. Here we go. Choonhound says, Urbanists seem to revel in making life harder, and this is verbatim, in making life harder for drivers. Less road building, removing parking spaces, removing lanes, etc., without offering any reasonable alternatives, especially for non-young single folks. If I have a job I need to commute to, a wife that needs me to bring home groceries, a kid that needs to go to soccer practice, how will a divided bicycle lane make my life, already very difficult in late-stage capitalism America, the least bit easier?
I feel like whatever I say, this person is not going to be convinced by my answer. Let's put it that way. I think I will say just a couple things. One is, I frankly just think it's sloppy, lazy thinking to say that it's just young, healthy people that want to be able to walk and bike places. It's just bullshit, frankly. Think about people who are mobility constrained, particularly elderly people who may not be able to drive or frankly shouldn't be driving because it's not safe. And think about the epidemic of elderly loneliness and how much that could be mitigated if people, frankly, like you see older people, again, in European cities who walk down to the coffee shop and engage with people or see their old friends there. My parents are now living in a sort of extended living community where they can walk everywhere, to restaurants and to the gym and to see their friends. And it makes me feel a lot better that they don't have to drive to those places. So I would caution against assuming that it's just like, I don't know, like 30-year-old white guys who want to be biking on the bike lanes. It's just not true. Sorry, go ahead. You want to jump in?
I would say in Los Angeles, it's actually, there's a lot of Hispanic people who cannot afford cars, who are commuting in those bike lanes. And
totally.
And I think the other thing that this question ignores is that for 100 years or so, we as a country have been subsidizing drivers at the expense of people who choose not to drive. And Henry Graybar book the talks a lot about that. And who's
Paved
the other
Paradise.
guy?
Paved Paradise.
Paved Paradise. And then who's the other book that he references a lot? The High Cost of Free Parking.
Is Donald Shoup, a UCLA professor.
Yeah. And I really would recommend reading one of those two books, The High Cost of Free Parking or Paved Paradise.
Paved Paradise is shorter by like 20% as long.
Yeah, both great books, and I don't necessarily think that it's not like Urbanists are coming for this dude specifically. You know, they are offering reasonable alternatives. I think to say that you're not offering reasonable alternatives is not what you're saying at all.
No, I think that's right. And then you made a point, Matt, like, we were talking earlier, saying, everybody who's biking or walking instead of driving frees up that much more car space for those who do need to drive or really want to drive. So I wish we could be pushing in the same direction. And frankly, I think we can. This person seems like they've already made up their mind. And like I said, I'm not sure anything I can say is going to make them think otherwise.
Okay. Red Zed just wants to listen to the last episode, but Tim, and tell that everyone should do the heart calcium test. Is no joke. Our friend who was outwardly very healthy and young and energetic had like a massive heart attack out of nowhere. It was really scary stuff. He told the story on the show a couple of weeks ago.
Oh God. So
yeah, if you're in your 40s. Your primary should just be a cardiologist at this point. Okay. Casey says a quick EV question here. After doing a bunch of research and crunching the numbers, my wife and I decided to buy a 2017 Volt. I love the Chevy Volt. The Chevy Volt is possibly the most underappreciated car of all time. Almost everything that people are saying about the new Prius and how awesome the new Prius is, the fucking Volt did like 10 years ago. The 2017 Volt, right, the car has 70,000 miles on it, and the battery charges to 35 miles of range. How much time do you think I have until the battery is toast, and what can I do to prolong its life? I'm in Western Washington. I mean, so hard to say how much time you have until the battery is toast, right? It had probably 42 miles of range when it was new 5 years ago, so it's lost maybe 10 to 15% in 5 years. It may continue to decline at that rate, so you can extrapolate that out. What can I do to prolong its life? Not much. If it was a full electric car and you had the option of DC fast charging or level 2 or level 1 charging at home, I would say to minimize the DC fast charging, particularly to 100%. The Volt doesn't DC fast charge. It only charges on a level 1 or level 2 at home. So you're just going to continue. I don't know what you can do. I would just say keep driving it and using it. The good news is that's a relatively cheap car, and you're going to get your money's worth out of it in fuel savings. But because it can't DC fast charge, and it's not like you're not going to charge your 35-mile battery to full, there's not a whole lot you could do in left. Okay, we got one more question, and then David's got to go. No problem. See, this is another one, David, where I concern this person has already made up their mind, but I would like to hear your thoughts. All-wheel drive biased. I live in Queens, New York. Very high population density. I've experienced with rows and rows of apartment buildings, a dozen floors high, yet individuals living in those buildings have only street parking available. Is there an electric revolution solution for these individuals who will presumably need to charge their vehicles?
So like street charging for electric vehicles?
Yeah, Queens is tough because it's not quite the density of Manhattan. In many cases, people do still need to drive to commute, but they're not quite there with the charging infrastructure, and very few people have private parking.
Yeah, this is a really difficult one, and it's a controversial one because in a place like Queens, curb space is so valuable. And it could be used for so many things. It could be used for curbside dining. It could be used for parklets, like little parks. It could be used for wider sidewalks. It could be used for bike lanes. And it could be used for, and it often is used now, for private car parking. New York City actually doesn't charge anything for residential parking outside of Manhattan. I believe that's still the case, which is weird to me, although I don't know that this person's going to agree with me there. This is a tough one because the question is, like, do we actually allocate some of that scarce resource of a dense city for EV curbside charging, or do we open the door perhaps to like a city bike? The bike share system in New York is adding a whole bunch of new e-bikes. Maybe it would be better used there to have it be an e-bike dock, because that space is going to be used by a lot more people if it's a bunch of e-bikes there. So I hate to say it to this individual, but it's not obvious to me that it really makes a ton of sense for the densest American cities to be allocating curb space, which is so valuable and underappreciated, to EV charging.
I actually agree. I don't think curb space should be used for EV charging. I think it probably makes sense to have a concentrated garage somewhere that is a power station, that is a parking garage, a traditional parking garage that has lots and lots of chargers and power, level 2 chargers, or even level 1 chargers. I think that makes sense. These cars sit a lot. They sit overnight, or they sit for days or even weeks sometimes. And having a traditional parking garage that had lots of charging in it makes sense. more sense than allocating street parking. Again, I recommend Paved Paradise. They spend a whole chapter talking about the value of New York City curbside real estate and how so many people who don't own cars are subsidizing those who do with that free street parking. And it really makes you think, even if you live in New York City and need or want a car, it still gives you something to think about. And we're not trying to tell you to sell your car. That's not what we're saying. David, thank you for your time. I really enjoy reading your work. It's always a pleasure to get your newsletter, which people can subscribe to at, of course, davidzipper.com. Yes, davidzipper.com.
Yeah, you got it exactly right.
And thanks for your time today. And keep up the good work, man.
No, I appreciate it. And I think you said we agree on like 80 to 90% of things. And we'll keep talking about the other 10 to 20. And it's always great to see you.
All right, dude. Take care. Thank you to our listeners and our patrons for asking such good questions today. And we'll see you guys at our next show. Bye.